The Obersalzberg at the beginning of 1940. Eva Braun went on a skiing tour with adjutants of the Führer. She had been Adolf Hitler's lover for almost 10 years now, but only few in the immediate circle knew of their relationship. The 27-year-old had long accepted the fact that she could only live in the shadows. In fact, Eva Braun was a very unhappy woman.
She lived in a golden cage that wasn't even particularly golden. She was caged in, and it's perfectly natural to be unhappy in such a situation where you cannot express yourself. She had already tried to take her life twice before, once with a pistol, once with sleeping pills. I think those attempts were a cry for help, and it worked insofar as Hitler cared about her more after that.
The war changed everything. The Alpine residence always became the Führer's headquarters when Hitler stayed at Obersalzberg. After defeating Poland, Hitler planned his next campaign against France. He had little time for his lover.
We know that he treated her like a wife. He needed someone like her to be loyal and trusting, someone he could rely on. She supported him mentally and emotionally until the end.
Who was that woman Hitler married shortly before his suicide? And what was life like with the greatest mass murderer in human history? In the meantime, nobody took notice anymore that Eva Braun, as a matter of course, played the lady of the house at Obersalzberg. She was addressed as Gnädiges Fräulein, Madam, or Fräulein Braun, Miss Braun. The staff called her the boss. The ideal world of Obersalzberg, the fake idyll of the Berghof and its inhabitants, were maintained for the public during the war as well. The dictator seemed untouchable up there. He also didn't cease his long walks. Sometimes, not only Eva's female friends were allowed to accompany him, but also outsiders like actress Magda Schneider, Romy Schneider's mother. Only close confidants like architect Albert Speer still had unlimited access to the dictator. Hitler's entourage soon complained about his growing unapproachability. Eva Braun's passion for photography was still unabated. She put all of her photos in her albums that were only discovered by chance after 1945. Christmas, New Year, 1939-1940, Berghof. Hitler taking care of his 9-month-old German shepherd, Wolf. She didn't give up filming either, which is the reason why the same scene also exists on 16mm colour film. The man of the house also let himself be filmed having coffee and cake, together with Albert Speer's children. The architect's family didn't live far away from the Berghof. Normally, Hitler's residence was off limits for the little ones, but at Christmas and on the Führer's birthday, they provided a welcome facade to create the illusion of a normal private life. One of Hitler's secretaries asked herself later, self-critically, how was that possible? A ruthless warmonger and fanatical mass murderer enjoyed lighting Christmas tree candles at the Berghof and had a distinct need for the joys of family life.
It's hard
to imagine Hitler, someone who ordered the Holocaust, as a nice and pleasant person in private, especially for the Germans or people in general after 1945. It was easier to picture him as a monster, a demon, just to distance themselves from that period of time. It was simple to separate yourself from him like that, and people from his immediate surrounding promoted a political and personal distance towards him out of their own interest. So not much was known about his real private life.
On New Year's Eve 1940, the dictator hosted a reception for the Berghof staff. Heinrich Hoffmann, his personal photographer from Munich, was also invited. Even during wartime, the Führer's old comrade made millions with postcards and photo books, and Hitler also got a good share of the profits. The new strongman at Obersalzberg was party secretary Martin Bormann. You had to get past him to approach the dictator. Bormann carried out all Hitler's unpleasant tasks. Gretel Braun was also part of the inner circle. She shared her older sister's passion for film and photography. Theo Morell, a popular doctor from Munich, also became part of that circle. He successfully healed Heinrich Hoffmann from venereal disease. The Brauns considered him a miracle healer. As almost every year, everybody gathered for a group photo. These photos from Eva Braun's album clearly indicate how she openly staged herself as Hitler's life partner. When Hitler wasn't at the Obersalzberg, Eva Braun retreated to the little house in Munich that was given to her by the Führer as a present. She held big parties there with her mother Franziska and sister Gretel. Her father, Friedrich, also reconciled himself to the fact that his daughter's relationship would remain a marriage without a certificate. Eva Braun still edited short films from her colour film recordings, which were then screened at the Berghof. Going for Walkies is the title of this short sequence she most likely shot in early 1940 at Wasserburger Street in Munich. From the beginning of April 1940, the dictator resided at the Berghof again. For months, Hitler had been planning his war against France. The Führer was confident that if he was victorious before Great Britain gained a foothold on the European mainland, the British would have to ask for peace. In the meantime, the dictator focused his attention on Scandinavia. Hitler had long since had detailed plans prepared for military action at the Norwegian Sea. On the 9th of April 1940, Operation Weserübung, Weser exercise, began, leading to the Wehrmacht's successful invasion of Norway. The small entourage of adjutants, secretaries, and old companions of the Führer, like Albert Speer, assembled on the terrace. It was claimed later that Hitler never talked politics in the presence of women. After the war, the surviving members of the inner circle professed that the dictator left them in limbo about his war plans. Nevertheless, Eva Braun's biographer doubts that the entourage was surprised by the attacks against Holland, Belgium, Luxembourg and France on May the 10th, 1940. Heinrich Hoffmann claimed in his memoirs that even during his trip to the Western Front, he believed that occupied Norway was the destination. His profession as photographer meant that he was at Hitler's side, and he most likely had more information than he wanted to admit later. Eva and Gretel Braun's films document how casual life was at the Berghof. While the Führer talked business with his adjutants, the ladies sat on a wall nearby. Hitler's reputed tendency towards utmost secrecy may have been a convenient assertion of the inner circle to avoid tiresome questions. Sometimes Eva Braun couldn't wait for her lover to leave the Berghof. One of the bodyguards later reported, "The limousines were still driving down the slopes of the mountain, and already the preparations for festivities were underway. 1 minute acting like a demure governess, she switched to full party mood in an instant, behaving in a playful, almost childish way." Hilde Speer at Mooslaner Kopf. When the Führer let himself be filmed at Obersalzberg, he liked to surround himself with the architect's children. Their father later recalled, "He never found the right, relaxed way to deal with them. A few gracious words and he turned to the next one. He considered children as offspring, representatives of the next generation. He enjoyed the way they looked, blonde, blue-eyed, their stature, sturdy, healthy, or their intelligence, bright, active, rather than their childlike behavior. He didn't win over my children with his personality." These photos from Eva's albums document that Adolf Hitler and Eva Braun privately behaved like a married couple, but the Führer still ruled out marriage.
Hitler was the only reason why he and Eva Braun didn't get married. He was afraid of a wife, afraid of her possible legal claims. That's what he also mentioned clearly in his talks at the Führerhauptquartier after 1942. A lover always remains something casual. She has no claims, and she stays dependent.
It's unclear if it was a strictly platonic relationship. Still today there are speculations as to whether Hitler lived out his sexuality at all. Eva's cousin didn't believe that it was an intimate relationship.
Für mich war es ja kein Verhältnis. Für mich war es ja immer
I didn't see it as a regular relationship, more like one between father and daughter.
Auch bis heute halte ich das aufrecht.
I may still believe it because I want it to be true. The thought of this man touching her is unbearable for me.
Der ist für mich einfach unerträglich.
At the Berghof, a small passage led from Eva Braun's bedroom to Hitler's. She had her own living quarters, but the photos of those rooms in her album don't give away any private details. It's hard to come to a conclusion regarding the intimacy of this relationship, as there is no proof. There aren't any letters from Hitler to Eva Braun. Even though many historians searched for years, they haven't found anything. Also, there are no letters from Eva Braun to Hitler. Everything has been destroyed, most likely before the final hours. It's quite possible that after the end of the war, the Braun family took care of the destruction of such letters as well. Albert Speer recalled as follows, "I was surprised that she and Hitler avoided anything that could imply an intimate relationship, but still in the evenings they went upstairs to the bedrooms together." Hitler's pet names for Eva Braun were Haschel and Chapelle. After the war, former servants were asked repeatedly if they noticed anything. They spoke of ruffled bedclothes, but there was nothing more concrete. One historian even claimed that the Führer was a homosexual whose relationship to Eva Braun was only a pretense, but there's no evidence for that theory either. Fact is that Eva Braun's terriers, Stasi and Negus, jealously watched their mistress's door. While the Wehrmacht invaded France within a few weeks and occupied Paris, Eva Braun spent her time at Obersalzberg. Then she was allowed to come to Berlin to celebrate the victory. The dictator returned to the Reich Chancellery on July the 6th, 1940, as a victorious field commander. Eva Braun filmed the scene from a window. "Flowers cover the streets where our Führer goes," Joseph Goebbels wrote enthusiastically. "Our people, our wonderful people." Meanwhile, Hitler's companion had her own rooms in the Führer's living quarters at the government headquarters. Speer wrote in his memoirs that she entered via a side entrance and stairway. She stayed in the rooms below, only when familiar faces were present. Eva Braun turned 29 on February the 6th, 1941. Her partner wasn't present. She celebrated with her family. As usual, he had jewelry sent to her as a gift. In the presence of her father Friedrich, mother Franziska and sister Gretel, Eva Braun was happier than usual. Everybody profited from her special relationship with Hitler. Nobody reproached her anymore.
During the early years, her parents may have disapproved of a relationship that didn't result in marriage. But, after all, as her father also said later, they were proud that their daughter was the Führer's girlfriend. At one point, during his trial, he also mentioned that his daughter wouldn't have chosen Hitler if he had been a bad person.
The dictator was in high spirits at the beginning of June 1941 at Obersalzberg. By then, he had subjected major parts of Western and Northern Europe to his rule. By his side, SS Commander Sepp Dietrich, an old comrade of his from the early days of the Nazi movement. Since December 1940, the dictator had been working out plans for a war of extermination against the Soviet Union. And these were developed further during staff meetings with his commanders at his Alpine refuge. Operation Barbarossa probably got its name from the panoramic view to the Untersberg. The mountain is said to be one of the mythical places where Emperor Friedrich Barbarossa has lain asleep for almost 1,000 years. A camera is demonstrated to the commander-in-chief. Eva and Gretel Braun filmed the scene. Their film, shot only a few weeks before the attack on the Soviet Union, was called Auf dem Berghof, at the Berghof. It's unclear if Hitler shared his plans with Eva Braun. Her biographer is sure that he somehow revealed them to his loyal partner. The Führer intended to destroy the Jewish Bolshevism. He believed that Great Britain would only cease resistance once Soviet Russia was defeated after a swift attack. The Braun sisters photographed and filmed this scene as well, on a day in June 1941. Hitler with one of Martin Bormann's sons. The dictator patiently agreed to pose like this. This is how Eva liked to see him, relaxed and in private. She frequently sold photos like this to Heinrich Hoffmann, who published them in propaganda photo books. Sepp Dietrich also let himself be filmed or photographed with the Speer family. His armoured division later repeatedly took part in war crimes and massacres. After the war, the so-called storyteller was sentenced to life imprisonment, but he never renounced his National Socialist convictions. As Hitler and his generals prepared for the start of the war against the Soviet Union, the women travelled to Italy. The group consisted of the Braun sisters, their mother Franziska, two friends, and Margareta Speer. Florence was their first destination. They were able to go shopping without being recognized, as Italy was ruled by friendly dictator Benito Mussolini. The women from Hitler's entourage remained fashion-conscious despite the war. Hats, dresses and suits were tailored in Berlin or sent to them from occupied Paris. Then the small tour group travelled to Naples to visit the ruins of Pompeii and Herculaneum. In the year 79 BC, both towns were caught off guard by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius and completely destroyed. Eva Braun visited the ancient amphitheatre wearing an elegant trouser suit. Afterwards, the ladies visited the volcano that was still occasionally active. Gretel Braun filmed her sister Eva amidst sulfur fumes and lava. Mount Vesuvius brought death in huge numbers to Pompeii and Herculaneum. In light of things to come during the war, these images are quite symbolic. 1 year later, the Berghof community assembled on the terrace to be filmed and photographed. 1942 was the year when the dictator's luck changed. One defeat followed another. This is evident in the Führer's appearance. Albert Speer later recalled that Hitler became less flexible in his thinking. He wasn't really able to develop new ideas. He was basically running on a fixed track and didn't have the strength to change direction. In the meantime, the Holocaust in the East was in full swing. The deportation from Germany and the occupied countries had begun.
Das ist sehr schwer zu beantworten, wie viel.
It's hard to tell how much she or the other women knew. Of course, those people weren't just spectators. They were privy of many things that happened. Eva Braun lived in Munich, and after 1933 you could see how the Jewish citizens were disfranchised. You read in every newspaper about the Aryanization. So the only question is if they knew about the physical annihilation of the Jews, that they were killed at the concentration camps. It's hard to tell. But we can be sure that everybody in Hitler's inner circle shared his anti-Semitic views.
At that point in time, Eva Braun was life partner to a mass murderer. Friedrich Braun had been conscripted to the Wehrmacht. The family photo also shows his eldest daughter Ilse, who worked for Albert Speer as a secretary. But unlike Gretel, she was not part of Hitler's entourage. As Ilse didn't earn a lot of money, Eva sent her 10 marks per month. She wrote that she couldn't ask the Führer for any favors for her family. When her sister criticized the dictator's politics, Eva forbade her to ever mention this topic again. Supposedly, she said, "If the Führer ever puts you in a concentration camp, I won't be the one to save you." In Eva's garden in Munich, the Brauns and their friends appeared in front of the camera to be in good spirits and content. But the Führer's 30-year-old lover had changed. Ilse Braun noted in her diary back then, Eva had become arrogant, tyrannical and tactless towards her family. Because she mixed with the VIPs, she behaved selfishly and sometimes cruelly. She gave away her discarded clothes as if she were the queen. In the summer of 1942, heavy suitcases were carried out of the house in Wasserburger Street. The Braun family and some of their friends were going on a holiday again, with the Führer's permission. Eva Braun brought her camera again. This was her last trip to Italy. An aeroplane from the Führer's fleet of planes took the ladies and gentlemen from Munich-Riem Airport to the sunny south. The Führer's chief pilot, Hans Bauer, was at the controls. During wartime, a costly pleasure trip was a rare privilege. German citizens weren't allowed to leave the country without special permission, and they could only take small sums of money with them. Their destination was the beach resort of Portofino near Genoa, where the Brauns had spent their holidays several times before. Eva, Gretel and a friend enjoyed their time by the sea. Unlike at the Berghof, they drank a lot of alcohol. During that summer, the Brauns spent 4 weeks with their friends in Italy. As German troops reached the Caucasus in the Soviet Union, Mother Franziska and her daughter Gretel passed their time knitting. Far from war and destruction, Eva Braun appears to be especially happy in this scene. Her dream world still existed. Hitler's secretary Martin Bormann had taken special precautions at Obersalzberg to protect the Führer against attacks from the land below or the air. The Obersalzberg could be enveloped in fog by special cannons. At the beginning of 1943, Hitler tested out this countermeasure for himself. He still felt safe from the Allied air forces that had begun to raze German cities to the ground. Since the surrender of the 6th Army at Stalingrad, the Führer reflected on a possible fall of the Third Reich behind closed doors. He confided in Propaganda Minister Goebbels, such a fall could only be the result of the German people's weakness. If the German people ever became that weak, they would deserve to be annihilated by a stronger people. They wouldn't deserve any pity then. Uschi, the daughter of Eva's friend Hertha Schneider, often had to pose for photos and films. Eva's biographer believes that she staged this family idyll to express her wishes for her future private life. When these scenes were filmed, Jewish children were being killed systematically at the death camps in the East. The Führer's birthdays were a fixed event in the social life at the Berghof. In 1943, Heinrich Hoffmann gave him a photo book as a present. The children of Bormann and Speer dutifully congratulated him. The maids and servants were also allowed to pay their respects to the 54-year-old dictator. Only 2 years later, Hitler would shoot himself in the head in his bunker under the Reichskanzlei's garden. "32-year-old Eva Braun became more and more important to Hitler. For the first time, Joseph Goebbels mentioned her in his diary. The Führer praises the quiet, intelligent and down-to-earth character of Eva Braun. She will be a valuable support for him.
It can't be denied that Hitler aged visibly during that war he couldn't win, and the early stages of his Parkinson's disease started to show. It's a harsh contrast to those early photos and films that Eva Braun shot of him.
The propaganda minister noted on March the 14th, 1944, Fräulein Braun showed us several colour films in her room. We could see the Führer during peaceful times. I have never seen him so relaxed on film before, but it was also apparent how much the Führer has changed during war.
In March of
1944, the war was basically over. Their downfall had become apparent. This doomsday feeling had spread widely at the Berghof.
In dieser Situation die alten Filme Eva Brauns hervorzukramen,
that they screened the old films of Eva Braun again showed that they wanted to escape that situation and recall the former happy days and the peaceful times they spent there.
Das zeigt auch, wie eng diese Gesellschaft zusammenlebt.
These people had a special bond, and they wanted to feel united again during those days.
Beschwören wollte.
On April the 20th, Hitler celebrated his 55th birthday at Obersalzberg. Eva Braun frequently complained about migraines, and Hitler patted her shoulder in concern. In public, they now behaved much less formally. On June 3, 1944, Eva Braun's sister Gretel married SS Gruppenführer Hermann Fegelein in Salzburg. Hitler's secretary Martin Bormann served as one of the witnesses. Fegelein, who killed tens of thousands of civilians in the East as commander of an SS cavalry brigade, saw his career secured. Hitler's secretary Christa Schröder later claimed that Eva arranged that marriage in order to see her sister finally married, and because she was in love with Fegelein herself. SS Commander Heinrich Himmler officiated at the wedding. According to the secretary, Eva Braun said, "I want this wedding to be as beautiful as if it were my own." The celebration took place at Obersalzberg. The bride was all dressed up and enjoyed her big day. Hermann Fegelein was considered a womanizer, and Christa Schröder believed that he rather liked the idea of being a kind of brother-in-law to the Führer. Eva supposedly said, "I'm grateful that Fegelein married my sister. Now I'm somebody. I'm Fegelein's sister-in-law." At the Great Hall of the Berghof, the dictator posed for a group photo with the newlyweds. Eva Braun wasn't in the picture. When Fegelein later fled from Hitler's bunker in April 1945, Hitler had him arrested, court-martialed, and shot. For the wedding banquet at Kehlstein, Martin Bormann had all available food and drinks served from the Berghof's still bulging storage rooms. 3 days after the feast, the Western Allies landed on the beaches of Normandy. It was the Second World War's final phase. The dictator left Obersalzberg for Eastern Prussia, leaving Eva Braun behind. When she received the message about the attempt on Hitler's life on July the 20th, 1944, she had a nervous breakdown. The slightly injured dictator had a macabre souvenir of the assault sent to her.
Die Tatsache, dass Hitler ihr nach dem 20.
The fact that Hitler sent her his shredded uniform after July 20th, 1944, shows how much she meant to him. Of course, he also tried to super-elevate his soldiership. "This is how I fight for my country. I'm doing everything in my power to reach my goals."
Meine Ziele zu erreichen. Im Grunde genommen war es ja ganz anders.
But the reality was different. He was secluded and separated from the world at the Wolfschanze, his headquarters. It's remarkable that he wanted her to see his shredded uniform. He acted basically like every normal man in his relation with her.
In the following weeks, Eva Braun travelled back and forth between Munich and Berchtesgaden. Her family didn't accompany her to Obersalzberg. Because she felt lonely there, she asked her cousin Gertraud from Jena to come and visit her. The 19-year-old was finally allowed to travel to Munich in August 1944.
Two SS men waited for me. One took my suitcase and the other said, "Get in the car, we'll take you to your cousin." I still thought they would take me to Munich, as I wanted to be there with her. But we drove out of the city, and I asked, "Where are we going?" The driver said, "We'll take you to Obersalzberg."
Since Hitler had left the Alpine refuge with his military retinue, it had quietened down there. Sometimes there was an air raid alert, but the British and Americans hadn't dared an attack on the Berghof. The restricted area was still under heavy guard by flak units and soldiers of the SS.
I had to open my suitcase and empty it, and I asked, "I don't know what this is all about. I only want to visit my cousin." They ordered me to empty it, and I did. And afterwards, I received a note that said, "Guest of the Führer."
The storage rooms were still well equipped in case of Hitler's return. Some servants looked after the Berghof and Eva Braun. When Gertraud arrived, her cousin wasn't there.
I was welcomed by a woman who led me to my room, and I asked where my cousin was. "She's at Königssee." I was told to relax a little and get comfortable, as she had gone for a swim there.
Film recordings from better days. Eva Braun with her family and friends at a waterfall above Königssee. Her father, Fritz, enjoyed the benefits resulting from his daughter's relationship until the bitter end. Gretel Fegelein had become pregnant in the meantime. She would give birth to her child during the chaos of the last months of war. Her husband had begun an affair with an actress from Berlin. After an SS soldier had caught him in the act, Hermann Fegelein had become persona non grata at Obersalzberg. In late summer 1944, Eva Braun went swimming with her cousin again. She always gave a happy-go-lucky impression.
Her happiness was so garish, it was obviously fake. I realized that it was only a facade, to cover up things that shouldn't be seen by others.
After a swim, the small group sunbathed at Kehlstein Plateau. The ladies even smoked, which was frowned upon in Hitler's presence. Eva Braun liked to smoke a lot. Just to annoy her partner, she allegedly often hummed the American song, "Smoke Gets in Your Eyes." She only became interested in the war's progress when the Allies reached the borders of Nazi Germany.
She completely ignored it until one day we were at the tea house. I saw a radio there and claimed that I wanted to move into the tea house. She agreed and just said, "You want to listen to the radio?" And I replied, "Yes, I want to know what's happening." There was no radio, no newspapers, only a few fashion magazines, mostly from out of the country. We were secluded from the world, and then I started bringing her the news.
And in September 1944, the news was anything but encouraging. Paris was liberated, the Americans had reached Aachen, and the Red Army, Eastern Prussia.
She got more and more serious then. Autumn came and we didn't go swimming anymore. I had breakfast and retired during the mornings. The frantic joyfulness was gone. And I think she was woken up by the news one day and then started planning her future path through life or to death.
After the failed attempt on Hitler's life, she supposedly wrote in a letter, the authenticity of which has never been confirmed, "My love, you know I always told you that I would die if something happened to you. I swore to myself from the first day we met that I would follow you everywhere you go, even to the death. You know that I only live for your love. Yours, Eva."
Mir ist es sehr, sehr bald eigentlich aufgegangen.
I soon realized that his phone calls played a crucial part in her life. She always waited eagerly for them.
Wichtige Funktion in ihrem Leben gehabt haben. Es drehte sich eigentlich
They didn't talk very long, not for hours, but maybe 10 minutes.
So stundenlang telefoniert oder so. Sondern,
we watched a movie. The phone rang, somebody ran outside to get it and then said, "Fräulein Braun, it's for you."
Und dann rannte sie raus und wir haben die
She ran outside and we continued with the movie.
Da habe ich gemerkt, also
the calls weren't really long,
Anrufe, sie braucht sie.
And I don't know what they
Was
talked
da
about,
gesprochen worden ist, weiß ich natürlich nicht.
but it was
Aber so
very
wie ich die
important to
Sache
her.
einschätze, war es wichtig, dass angerufen worden ist. Und
He called,
ja,
"We can leave
jetzt hat
now."
angerufen, jetzt können wir
He
gehen.
called, "We can
Jetzt hat
drive to
angerufen,
Munich
jetzt können wir
now."
nach München
Or,
fahren.
"Let's go for a
Oder komm, wir
walk."
machen noch einen Spaziergang.
She always
Sie hat
waited
darauf
for his call
gewartet und
and
sie hat
counted
damit
on him.
gerechnet.
If he wouldn't have
Ich
called,
glaube, wenn sie
she
nicht
would have been
gekommen
very
wäre,
sad.
dann
But the
wäre sie
calls
sehr
always
unglücklich
came.
gewesen, aber sie sind gekommen.
Eva Braun rarely drove to Munich anymore since her hometown had been bombarded. The future appeared so bleak to her that she dictated her last will and testament on October the 26th, 1944, in which she left all she possessed to her family.
Nachdem Bomben auf München gefallen waren,
After the bombs had fallen on Munich, she realized that the end was near. It's remarkable that a 32-year-old woman wrote her last will and testament, basically declaring that she was certain that she would die together with Hitler.
Vor allen Dingen aber damit zu erklären, dass sie schon
She
sehr
wanted to
früh
die with him,
ganz
no
sicher
matter
war,
where.
dass sie mit Hitler sterben
If he would have stayed in Eastern Prussia, she may have taken her own life in Munich.
Ostpreußen geblieben wäre, hätte sie sich wahrscheinlich in München
Of course, she didn't know how the end would come, but when she wrote her will, she had realized that when Hitler died, she would die too.
Klar, wenn Hitler stirbt, sterbe ich auch.
At the beginning of March 1945, she went on her last trip to Berlin.
Die Fahrt Eva Brauns nach
Her trip to Berlin had most likely been arranged. It wasn't just out of the blue.
Plötzlich war Eva Braun.
It was quite clear that she would go there to die together with Hitler. She didn't just show up at the bunker. The wedding at the end was a spontaneous decision. He must have thought that he owed it to her and her loyalty throughout all those years.
She said her goodbyes to family and friends during a 4-week stay in Munich. Gertraud had left Obersalzberg already in October 1944. For a long time, she believed that her cousin had stayed there until the end.
Ich habe dann der Eva noch geschrieben, auch Adresse Berghof, und habe nichts.
I sent a letter to Eva at the Berghof address, but I didn't hear back from her. I heard it on the news. First, they said that Hitler died a hero's death, and I still didn't know about Eva. But in June, they mentioned for the first time that he had married and taken his life together with his wife. I got the impression that she somehow wanted to let her family know that she had married after all.
Sie hat ja das Leben einer Mätresse geführt.
She led the life of a mistress, and the family wasn't happy about it, no matter if she was the mistress of Hitler or anybody else. But in the end, she became a married woman.
Und sie ist dann doch eben Ehefrau geworden.
I can imagine that this was very important to her. She married a sick old man, a murderer, a criminal.
Eines todkranken Mannes geworden, eines Verbrechers, eines Mörders.
And her last consequence was going to her death with him.
The dictator married Eva Braun during the night of the 28th to the 29th of April, 1945, but their union did not even last for 48 hours. At 4:30 in the afternoon on April the 30th, Eva Hitler poisoned herself with potassium cyanide. Shortly thereafter, Adolf Hitler also committed suicide. Their bodies were soaked with petrol and burnt.